Good morning, scholars. Today we're going to resume our way through Pharr's Homeric Greek, a book for beginners, looking at the vocabulary, grammatical concepts, and reading of Iliad Book 1, lines 59 through 67. This is the first great speech of Achilles. Now, I'm going to treat this speech as a whole, as opposed to the way Pharr treats it, where he breaks it up into two units, just because I want the speech to be held together in its integrity. So this will be a long video for that reason, because it's actually 2 in 1 as Pharr sees it. Okay, so ātre nun ἀμέ πλαγχθέντας οείο άψαπο νόστε σεν κεν θάνατον γεπουγόημεν εἴτε homou πόλεμος τεδαμai kai lomos archaious al agade tenamanten eíromen eírea kai ωνεροπόλον kai gatona ek diosesten hos ke poi Hortatos onekos atopoi bos Apollon eīte hogugoles epimem petai eit hekatombes aiken posar non knisis aigon teteleon boulet antiasas hemin apolloi gonamūnai. Okay, so for the vocabulary, ātre is a vocative singular, the son of Atreus, Agamemnon, of course. Āmме is Iolic form of the first plural accusative personal pronoun, equals hemeos, and then palem means back, where one came from, or back again. Plagkhthέντας, from plazω, is an accusative plural, first aorist, passive participle, from plazω, as I said. And plazω means to beat back, to drive back from one's goal, to foil or to baffle. And this is a very important Homeric word. I write here that its worth comparison is the characterization of Odysseus in the opening lines of the Odyssey. He's characterized there as andra polutropon hos mala pola plagkhte. A very versatile, much versatile man who has been baffled about, foiled in so many ways. And so there in the beginning of the Odyssey, Odysseus is treated as being baffled and suffering under the blows of Apollo. So here, at the beginning of the Iliad, the Achaeans are baffled by the blows of Apollo, avenging the priest, and eventually the whole Greek force will be baffled by the Dios Boulé, the plan of Zeus to give honor to Achilles. So this verb in the aorist passive, plazω, is a very important verb with deeply Homeric resonances generated out of the openings of both the two great poems. Okay, so oio, to think, or I think. This verb occurs mostly in the middle. You'll most often see oiomai, and the active is restricted to the first person present indicative, as here. Now, oiomai is one of those passive deponents, i.e. deponent verbs whose aorist have a passive form but an active or middle meaning, so a passive deponent. And most of these passive deponents express mental action of some sort. So if we look at the entry for oiomai from Smythe's Index of Verbs at the back of the grammar, we see that it means to think. The first person in prose is usually oimai, whereas you have the imperfect ἀμῖναι, and then ἐἴρομαι for, I guess they're calling that your future. These often the futures is like it says in 811. The future is usually middle in form. So ἐίρομαι, and then εἴτε. You see that form? That is our aorist passive form, but it would have just an active meaning. It would just be, it would, the passive sense would disappear, and it, as a passive deponent, it would have active meaning. So that's just, be well aware of that. Next, ops. Ops, an adverb meaning in reverse direction backwards. And then aponostesein, from aponosteo, to return or to go or come back. And the aponosteo is your root there, or your root substantive notion is that of nostos, a return. So just as the Odyssey tells us about the good nostos of Odysseus, he returns and reclaims his home. So, for instance, Aeschylus's Agamemnon tells of the bad nostos, the bad return of Agamemnon. So, thanatos, we've seen that verb before, thanatos. Ge is very important particle here. It's postpositive and enclitic. It is an intensive and restrictive particle with the force of at least, at any rate, even, certainly, indeed, but often to be rendered by intonation. Ge may indicate assent, concession, banter, scorn, deprecation, irony, and other things. Ge emphasizes single words or whole phrases or clauses. So here Achilles is saying, if at any rate will escape death at all. Pugoimen is a second aorist optative. You see that iota right before the personal ending, and that's your suffix of the optative, from pugo, to flee or escape. So our whole protasis is ken thanaton ge pugoimen, ken thanaton ge pugoimen. And so here we have the Homeric version of the protasis of a less vivid future, that is, a should, would condition. And we see that in Homer, I'll just read the bullet point, ken, with the optative is sometimes found in Homer, and apeiron occurs once in book 2 of the Iliad. This is a mark of the unsettled usage of the earlier language, in which ken or on was not yet required with the subjunctive in conditional protases, and was still allowed with the optative or indicative. And you can look at Goodwin, Moods and Tenses of the Greek Verb, section 401. It is difficult, he says, to see any essential difference between these protases with ken and those with simple a and the optative, which is what you'd find in Attic. As Smythe tells us in 2.3.2.9, that the less vivid future conditions, would-should conditions, have the protasis with a plus the optative, and the apodosis with on plus the optative. Well, here we're just seeing that Homer can get away with inserting ken with the optative in these protases in the a clause without any real distinguishable difference. So Smythe at 2.3.3.4 has a fuller note where he reiterates these things that I just said about a ken or a on with the optative having the same force as a alone with the optative. And here at B, he tells you that in the apodosis, you can have the primary tense of the indicative, either the present or the future. And so if we look at what we actually have, atre ide nun ӓμμε πλαγχθέντας oi apsapoto noste sein ken thanaton gepugoimen. If at any rate where we would escape death, I think, son of Atreus, that we, struck as we are backwards, ought to be returning home. So something to that effect. Okay. So, continuing with our vocabulary, homu is at the same time. Polemos, of course, is war, battle, armed conflict. And with Homer, you can have that word begin with a pi and a tau, ptolemos. And then we have the particles te kai joined together to mean both and. And then we have damai, alpha with the subscript, from damazdo, which is to put an end to destroy, to kill, to break in, to tame, to bring into subjection. And so here it just generally has the meaning of to destroy or kill. So our full protasis, that second protasis, eíte homu polemos te damai kai loimos akaius. It's a second wing of a combined protasis, which Smythe talks about at 2.366. So this is a combined protasis where the second is added to explain or define the former. The particle eíte, if really, enforces the contrast between the hypothetical optative pugoimen, escape from death, expressed in the lead of protasis, and the all too real future indicative damai, onslaught of both endless war and now plague. This is called by Goodwin the, quote, future indicative in present suppositions, and is explained by Goodwin at section 407, where he writes, even the future indicative with a may be used as a present condition if it expresses merely a present intention or necessity that something shall be done or happen hereafter, as when a tuto poiese means if he is now about to do this, and not, as in an ordinary future condition, if he shall do this hereafter. So in this passage, Goodwin cites our passage here and translates it as, if both war and pestilence are to lay the Achaeans low. Eíte homu polemos te damai kai loimos akaius. So again, the point here is that you can have this combined protasis where you have two a clauses that follow one another, and the difference of tenses and moods between the clauses can be a reflection of the mentality or emphasis, the vividness or urgency that each wing of that clause, of that combined protasis might express. These are just some of the fine subtleties that mood, your choice of mood, can bring to a Greek, Okay. So we have here, I have a note on intensive de from Smythe 2843. Intensive de emphasizes and makes definite adjectives, adverbs, pronouns, and other words. So you can look at this yourself, but I'll look at the first couple examples. Hapantes de means absolutely all. Kratistoi de means the very best. Monos de means quite alone. Oligoi de, very few. And if we go back down to the bottom of this, you see with other words, eíte, which is what we have, means if indeed. Eíte homu polemos te damai kai lomos akaius. If indeed war and plague. So, very emphatic. Now we have ala de, aga, often occurs with an expression of a imperative or akin to an imperative. So here we have eîrομαι, the hortatory subjunctive, and this is an example of a short vowel subjunctive. We see eîrομαι, the omicron is short form rather than the omega, which you would expect as your mood suffix for the subjunctive. So, and here I cite how Cunliffe and Smythe have a different take on where this verb is coming from, but we need not sweat this too much. It's from eîrome, and if you look up eîrome in Smythe's Index of Verbs, you'll see this form eîrομαι identified as a short verb, a short vowel subjunctive. And here it's a hortatory subjunctive. Let us ask. But come, let us ask. And so montes, homontes, has two genitives, monteos, and also monteos, and it refers to a prophet or a seer. And tena is enclitic here, means it's indefinite, which he's asking to let us consult, let us ask some seer. And then we have a, which means or. Then hieros, a priest, a kai, or even. This, when kai means even, it's often referred to as adverbial kai, a kai, or even. Ωνεροπόλος. Ωνεροπόλος is one skilled in the interpretation of dreams, and onar, to onar, is a dream itself. Likewise, the word oneros is another word for dream. So, as I said, we have here the hortatory subjunctive, al agade tenamanten eîrome. And it continues, hos ke poi hortatoson ekosato poi bosapolon. And here we have, some various ways in which the editors read this. Monroe and Allen, and I would assume Pharr, read this as a less vivid future conditional relative clause, which has the optative, the epoi, but Homer, as we've seen, sometimes uses ke or an in this relative clause. So hos ke epoi, we've already seen that. Whereas Becker, who did the glorious work of attempting to supply the digammas where your normal text would not have it, he has hos re pe hortatoson ekosato poi bosapolon. He takes this as a more vivid conditional relative and uses the subjunctive with an, although Homer can use the subjunctive with or without an or ke. So these are just some of the variants in the way Homer handles these conditional relative clauses, and likewise the way he handles these the conditional if clauses, if-then statements. So these are fine points of difference from Attic, which really it pays to memorize one example of each and put it on a card and to have it for future reference so that you're not thrown too much when you see them subsequently. So, like I say, this is a conditional relative clause. Hos ke poi hortatoson ekosato poi bosapolon. And these conditional relative clauses can be resolved into if clauses. And this is important to realize, that the way the tenses and moods get used is consistent across both the if clauses and the conditional relative clauses, and even your temporal clauses. So in this case, a conditional relative clause may be resolved into an if clause, where hos or hostes corresponds to eītes, and hos or hostes an to eantes. The negative, of course, is always may. The antecedent of a conditional relative is indefinite. So what does he mean by that? He means what we saw earlier, the tenamanten. Let us call some seer who might say, or who could say. Reading B, such relative clauses, like temporal clauses, correspond in form to the protasis of ordinary conditional sentences. And that's your most important thing to come away with. This thing I call the great correspondence, that relative clauses, temporal clauses, and the protasis of ordinary conditional clauses are going to follow the same rules or tendencies with respect to their use of moods. Very good. So now we have hote, why, toson, to such an extent or so greatly. That's an adverbial accusative. And then ko sato. Ko amai is this verb that's very repeated often in this early bit of the Iliad, meaning to be angry or to conceive wrath. So this is Apollo, ko sato. Hote toson, ko sato. Why? So greatly he's pissed off. Then we have eīte. Eīte is a disjunctive particle that is usually doubled, and in that case it means whether, or, if, or, like Latin sive, giving equal value to each supposition. So in more general terms, indirect alternative questions are introduced by the particle signifying whether, or, and that would be poteron, potera, a, or eīte, what we see here, or e, or even eīte. And these are the various ways for Greek to say whether or, to give two alternatives in questions. I asked you whether you were coming or whether you were going to stay home. That type of thing. So eīte, usually in Attic, gives equal value to each alternative. So we have this wonderful example from Plato. Ten skepsin poiometa eīte opelian eīte blabein pa eke. Let us make the inquiry whether it produces benefit or injury. Okay, one of those wonderful Platonic sentiments. Let us push for the truth, whether it's going to harm us or benefit us. Ten skepsin poiometa eīte opelian eīte blabein pa eke. And then this note, in Homer, however, eīte almost always retains the meaning either or. And so Smythe here even cites our passage, line 65. So eīte, eit archogoles, epimem petai eit hekatombes. So whether either he faults us for our faulty prayer or for a faulty sacrifice, hecatomb. So our main verb in this line is epimembetai, which means to blame or find fault with, show displeasure, and it takes the genitive of expressing, with regard to what it takes displeasure. So we see Smythe 1405 that with verbs of emotion, the genitive may denote the cause. Such verbs are to wonder at, to admire, to envy, to praise, blame, pity, grieve, or be angry at, take vengeance on, and the like. So here we have Apollo, hypothetically, maybe, finding fault with eukole, a vow, which means, i.e., a vow not performed. You made a promise to him, but you didn't fulfill it. Eukole. Eukomai is to boast. It's a verb meaning to boast. So it's wonderful how these verbs and nouns point to one another. But eukole, so a vow, and hekatombe is a great or costly sacrifice, literally a sacrifice of 100 oxen and sheep and goats. Hekatombe. So, and we also see eukomai, meaning just simply to pray. So when Croesus was prayed to Apollo, we have hos pato eukomenos. So pos, here it's enclitic, so I guess I probably shouldn't even have the accent on that. And in that sense, it's indefinite. If somehow, and can mean perhaps. So if somehow, pos, enclitic. And then arna, ton or tain, no nominative singular occurs, and it's a ram, a sheep, or a lamb, and can be masculine or feminine. Knises, knises is the fat, the smoke that's coming off of burnt offerings. And igos, of course, is goat, again, masculine or feminine. Teleos, teleon refers to perfect, without spot or blemish of a sacrifice. Metaphorically, it can mean sure or certain. And there's one wonderful place where it modifies an ego and refers to the bringing the surest presage of fulfillment, teleos. And so in line 5, we saw the verbal equivalent, dios de tele to boule, and the plan of Zeus was being fulfilled. So teleos is, again, wonderful word connected with Greek sacrifice and religion. So we're going to have the verb boulomai, to be willing or ready, which takes the infinitive, I'm willing to do X. And so Smythe 1991, verbs of will or desire and their opposites are often followed by an infinitive. The infinitive with a subject accusative denotes that something should or may be done. The negative is may. Now, boulomai is one of our passive deponents, just like oiomai. The deponent verbs whose aorist have the passive form but active or middle meaning are called passive deponents. And boulomai wish, bouletain, I wished. The future is usually middle in form, and most passive deponents express mental action of some sort. So wishing or thinking. So here I have the entry from Smythe's Index of Verbs, and you see, reading the forms in bold, boulomai, then boule somai. You have the future being in the middle, as 8:11 tells you to expect. And then bebu lemai are perfect. See the reduplication, so you know you're dealing with the perfect. And then ebuletain are aorist, which is a passive deponent, i.e. passive form, but active or middle meaning. Okay. So what we have in this passage at two different places, and that you have to be ready for all over the place in Homer, are what are called short-vowel subjunctives. Now, so remember we saw that the thematic vowel in the subjunctive becomes either omega as a long form of omicron or eíte as a long form of epsilon. But Homer will have instead the omicron and epsilon instead of omega and eíte especially in the first and second aorist of mid-verbs and in the second aorist passive. So he gives these examples, but he says verbs in omega rarely show the omicron epsilon, i.e. the short vowel subjunctives in the present. But we do have them, okay? So here, most editors read bouletai antiasas hemin apoloigon ἀμῦναι, whether he might wish, and that has to be viewed as a subjunctive, whereas Martin West just goes ahead and gives you the eíte that you suggest for the subjunctive, and elides the alpha iota to keep your scansion right. Bouleit antiasas hemin apoloigon ἀμʉναι. And so too, earlier with allagede tenamanten eīrome eīreia, that eīrome, we see the omicron there, but that has to be a subjunctive, our hortatory subjunctive, but come, let us ask some seer or priest. It has to be a subjunctive, so it is an example of these, like somebody says, the verbs of omega that rarely show omicron epsilon in the present. But if you're reading Homer, it's not really rare at all, but something you always have to be ready for. Okay, so ἀμούναι is a first aorist active infinitive, and this is one of those forms of the infinitive that's a little difficult to get your mind around, this alpha iota ending. ἀμούναι, from ἀμούνω, which means to ward off, to keep off, or to avert. So, and we see that this occurs with the dative hemin here. So it's you avert or keep off something in the accusative from someone in the dative. So you keep off loigon from hemin, from us. And so this is an example of the dative of advantage or disadvantage. And so Smythe 1481, the person or thing for whose advantage or disadvantage anything is or is done is put in the dative. The dative often has to be translated as if the possessive genitive were used, but the meaning is different. So what he's saying here is, he's warding off the plague of us, but you might translate it as if it were a possessive genitive, our plague, the plague of us, but it's really expressed by a dative. So he gets more deeply into this exact type of expression at 1483, where he says that with verbs of depriving and warding off and the like, the dative of person may be used. So let's look at these examples. To sustrate uen apelen spisen eíte san. They asked him to relieve them, i.e. to take away from them, serving in the war, to relieve them of their military service. To sustrate uen, apelen, to take away, spisen, to take away from them, eíte san, they asked. And here's another example of a passive deponent, this eíte san. And then the other example, to ward off ruin from the Danae, Danaoisen logon ἀμούνων, ward off ruin from the Danae, and ἀμούνων is an imperative as well. Okay, so that's a lot of material there for this very complex first speech of Achilles. So here we go to conclude. Atreide nun hama palim plagthέντας oio, aps aponoste sen, eken thanaton gepugoimen, eide homu polemos te damai kai loimos akaius, al agade tinamanten eīreomen hiere a, kai ωνεροπόλον, kai gato na ek dios estin, hos ke poi hotatoson ekos atopoi bosa polon, eta hogugoles, epemem petai et hekatombes, ken pos arnon knesis antios aigon teteleon, bulet antiasas, hemin apolloi gon ἀμῦναι. Okay. So that's the famous and wonderful first speech of Achilles. I wish you good luck in assimilating and putting together all of these advanced concepts. Be patient with yourself and read the passage again and again. Memorize the little lines where you have your optatives and subjunctives and stuff, so you have good examples of the hortatory subjunctive and these various moods, optative, especially in the Protasis. And just good luck. Do not despair. It's truly wonderful. Keep working hard, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.